Afternoon, guys. Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. Out here looking for a spot to camp tonight, and I'm looking for an area obviously that is on higher level ground. I don't want to get in the lowland areas in case it were to rain. I'm looking above my head for deadfall material, dead trees, widowmakers, things like that, and I'm in an area right now that is pretty much solid hickory, and any type of hickory is a really robust tree. Very seldom do they have dead branches and things like that hanging off of them. Very seldom do they die. There's one beside me over here that's probably, I don't know, garbage can lid size around. Another one, two more right behind me here that are fairly close to that size. And a lot of small saplings and other ones in here that are about half that size. So I feel pretty comfortable in this area. I'm going to pick a spot out here, throw up a tarp, make camp for the night. Stay with me, guys. Okay, you can see I set my backpack down on a large hickory here. Is probably twice the size of a 55-gallon drum, or half again that size. A great big one. And there's a sapling here and a pretty good sized one right here beside it. So that triangle right there gives me a pretty good area. Now there's a game trail that runs through here as well, and I don't want to camp on that game trail, but it doesn't run between these three trees, so I'm pretty safe there. I don't want a deer running me over at night and not realizing I'm there. So we got to be cognizant of things like that as well. Game trails are not somewhere you want to camp directly on if you can help it. So I think stringing up between these two will be fine. I'd like to face the front of my shelter south, which is this direction, but I'm not going to force the issue if I can't. There's quite a bit of debris back here. Doesn't really matter. I could set up in either direction, and I think I can go ahead and face my outward side of my shelter this direction to the south, put my fire right here between me and this big tree that my pack's leaning against. I think we'll be in pretty good shape. Lots and lots of dead wood in here that I can use for firewood later on. There's no reason not to collect it and put it aside now, off to the side of where I plan to put my camp. And then I'm going to go through and make sure that there's nothing sticking up in here anywhere that I don't want to lay on in the middle of the night, in the area where I know I'm going to put my bedding at. Okay, so I've picked my location between two trees and I'm going to put my tarp for the night. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just a little bit of trickery here that I've never showed in another video before. I like to give you guys something new every time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my line that's against the tree and I'm going to run it through the corner of my tarp. And this would work if it was a grommet as well, but grommets tend to tear out where these tie-outs don't. Then I'm going to get that thing up about waist level, and this is where I have my bowline knot, and I'm going to pull it through the bowline, and then I'm going to pull that against the tree so that the starting point of my tarp is already held in place without any other assistance, basically, and it's against this tree pulling out. Then I'm going to get it evened up with the center of the tree and go across to my other one. Okay, now I've got a situation here that's going to happen to you. That's why I'm leaving it in the footage here. I'm going to stay here, but these trees aren't really far enough apart for this tarp. That's no big deal, because what I'm going to do is I've just broken myself off a piece of stick like I usually do to put in my trucker's hitch tag loop here, and I'm going to stretch that tag loop out a little bit so that I get to the second grommet attachment point on the tarp instead of the first one. And I'll put that through, and I'll put that stake through there, and then I'll pull that thing taut just like this, and I'll just have a corner of that tarp that's hanging down Or I can take it up and I can come around this tree with my tag end, and I can pull it tight against the tree just like this. It's no big deal. And that'll bring it up. It's still not going to be tight, but it'll bring it up. This right here is going to hold my tarp tight. This is just going to keep it from flapping, but it really doesn't matter if it lays down a little bit like that. That's not a big deal. What I'll do is I'll account for that when I stake the back of the tarp down, and I'll leave one of these, I'll go one over with my stake as well. So what I've got is I've got one side of this hanging down, which that's not a big deal. This is it's an 8 foot by 8 foot tarp. So there's plenty of room across this side, and it's plenty deep. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick the back of this tarp up a little bit. And we have the advantage with this tarp because it has that center row of grommets going down the middle for tie-out points. I'll show you how that works right now. Okay, so this tarp has got a set of center tie-outs on it here. And what I've done is I've just cut myself a green stick, and I'm going to shove it through 2 of those tie-outs, just like this. And I have cut a V-notch in that stick. Very similar to what we talked about in the notching videos. And I'm going to put this piece of paracord through here and pull that knot, that bow line, right into that V-notch. Then I'm going to come back here to a tree and use that to force that up. And I can use that same trucker's hitch knot back here to keep the tension on it. So I've brought that rope up into a tree fork of a sapling just like this. Then I'm just going to come up in here and make another one of those trucker's hitch style knots, a tensioning loop that I can pull against just like this. Pull that taut to exactly where I want it, and then just tie that thing off just like I did my ridge line, and I'm done. So now what I have is this. I hope you guys can see this shelter. I'll try to give you a better view of it here in a few minutes. Okay, I'll try to give you a view of what this looks like from the inside. You can see there's that 1 2 foot that's dropped down all the way back. That crown in the back side in the middle there that we pulled up. So you've got lots and lots of room in there to work. And that's what's important. That should give you a very, very good waterproof shelter that you can actually sit up in, do tasks, whatever you need to do out of the weather if it were to rain. Okay, now if I really wanted to weatherproof this thing to the best I could, and I was worried about wind, high winds, things like that, I've got 2 grommets here that are off of the ridge line because I'm pulling against the 2 corners, pulling it away from the ridge line. What I would do with that is I would take 2 pieces of number 36 bank line like this, bring them up onto here, pull that down, wrap that around 2 or 3 times, just like that, and then pull the tag end through like this. Just like this. And that's going to give me a pretty secure situation that I can get undone fairly easily if I need to. And I do the same thing on the second one over here, so that it was connected to the line to keep it from whipping around too much in the wind. Now that's going to give me a really, really tight, secure ridge line on the top of my tent. I've got a toggle here connected to my loop. I have this tied off to the line, this tied off to the line with quick ties, and then I have the other one tied directly to the tree rope or the rope that's going around for the ridge line. That thing is going to be very robust even in heavy wind. Okay, I'm going to show you another little bush trick that I use a lot. I always carry a piece of rope with me, generally about 20-25 feet long. It's usually made out of hemp or a cotton. That way it's a natural material in case I need to use it for burning purposes. And I've got the ends tied off, and I use this a lot for things like either a Roycroft pack frame, if I needed to carry something in an emergency and something were to happen to my pack, or I use it to wrap my wool blanket around me as a piece of outerwear because I generally multi-use that wool blanket for outerwear. So what I've done is I've just taken another T, another toggle, and I've put a lark's head knot in that toggle. Same stick that I used for my ridge. And I'm just going to take this rope And the other thing I like about natural material rope is it binds really good against bark. You can see it almost sits up there all by itself. And I'm just going to put it on this tree, just like this. And you can see how well that's binding all on its own. I don't have to put hardly any knots or anything in that to keep it where it needs to be. But by putting that on the tree, I now have a place I can hang my pack and keep it off the ground. Even though my pack has a liner in it, because it has a garbage can in it, I still don't like to have my gear on the ground. So I can hang my gear from this tree just like this and easily get to anything I need to get to, and I don't have to really bend over to get it anymore. Now it's right here at waist level where I can get to it really easy and my gear's not sitting on the ground. The other advantage to having your pack hanging at waist level and easy to get to the things that you want without picking up your pack, if you've got this bushcraft type pack that's got an axe sleeve on it, you've got a place to drop your axe where it's secure off the ground, covered up. Nobody's going to get hurt and you're not going to misplace it. Okay, so now that we've got our shelter built, the next thing we need to think about is conduction from the ground. We're going to be laying directly on this ground, so we've got to do something to battle conduction. And we can do several things there. We can pile debris up inside here, a few inches thick when it's compressed, or we can just carry something simple like a ground mat or a ground pad. And you can buy these a lot of places, from very cheap to very expensive, but what I find works really well for me is just a thick exercise mat from Walmart. This is a Gold's Gym brand exercise mat. It's very pliable and stretchy, so it can be used for first aid. It doesn't seem to get stiff in cold weather. I've used it up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in minus 13 degree weather, and it seems to work fine for me. So I usually carry that, and I'll put that directly on the ground wherever I'm going to sleep and put my blankets on top of it. And then I can use this to sit on, get myself off the ground so I'm not putting my butt and my knees in the dirt when I'm doing things before I sleep at night. And I'll just throw it up inside there, lay my blankets on top of it, and lay right down in there. Now you want to get in there and kind of feel around and make sure that you don't have anything like this stick up I've got right here. There's a branch sticking up right there that I don't want in me at night when I'm sleeping, where I cut one off. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that down lower into the dirt to make sure I don't have that problem. And I'll feel everywhere I'm going to lay to make sure that there's no sticks or branches or debris underneath me that I'm going to lay on in the middle of the night. And I'll make sure I'm good and up inside here and underneath. I'll sleep with my head up toward the cover and my feet out, generally, unless it's cold weather and I'm going to sleep sideways in here for the fire. Then I would sleep this direction. But for tonight, because it's not going to get probably less than 50 degrees for sure. It's probably going to be in the high 50s, actually, maybe even the low 60s. I would sleep with my head up in here and my feet out, because there's a little bit of a downhill grade here. You never want to sleep with your head on the downhill side. You'll wake up with a nice big headache in the morning, and you won't understand why. So always look at the grade of the ground and sleep with your head uphill when you can. So that's what I'm going to do for the night. Now, the components that I would use to sleep with in a normal situation generally are, I would carry a couple things with me. First of all, I would have what I call a browse bag. And my browse bag is very simply about a pillowcase size bag. It's made out of muslin that I can stuff with something for a pillow, or I can stuff it with a blanket. And I have a shroud blanket, what I call a shroud. It's actually about a twin size Civil War replica blanket. And I use that for, number one, a pillow if the weather's not going to be too cold. And during colder weather, when I put my full-size queen wool blanket over my body as a piece of outer layer, I can put this shroud over the top of that to form a cape, which gives me a second layer of wool there to hold in the warmth. It also gives me a second layer to shed any weather that may be coming. So what I'll do is I'll take that and stick that inside my browse bag, basically just like this, sideways, and that will be my pillow for the night that I'll use to sleep on. And I'll just fold that browse bag underneath, and that becomes my pillow. And then I'll use my queen size wool blanket that I have in my pack. Then I'll roll my queen size blanket out, and that's what I'll sleep on. This is the same one that we saw on our website. It's a merino wool 96 by 96 wool blanket. I slept in this thing all during the advanced class on the ground, just like I am right now. Browse bag for a pillow, rubber mat, or the rubberized mat, and this wool blanket. It got down in the low 50s a couple of nights, and I was fine underneath the shelter. Now, bear in mind that when you are building a shelter like this, you have to bear in mind the temperature as well, because the warmer weather, you want to get your ridge a little higher so that air can flow through your shelter system. If the weather is going to be colder, you want to drop that ridge down lower so that it holds the heat in, because your heat's going to rise. So if it rises up and leaves all of a sudden and you don't trap any of that heat, you're going to get colder. You drop that ridge down, it's going to keep you warmer even without a fire in mild temperatures. So what we'll do tonight is we'll just sleep with this wool blanket right here on this rubber pad, browse bag, shelter. We're good to go. So now it's time to get the tick off my hand and then start a fire. Stay with me, guys. Okay, here's something I want you to think about. Here's my fire area. I've scraped that out with my foot really good. Got all the dead leaves out of the way, down to the dirt, the weeds, things like that. And I've actually cleaned that area out all the way over to my camp. I've got that fire about 1 full step and a half away from the front of my shelter, but I don't want anything right up on my shelter where those dry leaves are either, in case something were to pop out of that fire into my shelter. Very important thing to think about, and I think is oftentimes overlooked.